Hi, and thank you for the introduction, Heidi. So my name is Katie Von Holzen, and I'll be presenting to you today about our project ManyBabies-At Home, and I'm really presenting on behalf of the consortium, the ManyBabies-At Home consortium. So what are we? Well, we're a project that's aiming to make online infant testing more robust and more accessible to researchers. We've identified several goals that we're going to try to achieve in this project. And today, what I'd like to do is outline for you the different ways that we're trying to meet these goals. So addressing different challenges in online infant testing, supporting researchers in adopting these methods, and establishing best practices in this area. Fortunately, I'm not alone. I'm part of the the leadership group, along with researchers from England, Ireland, and Japan, and we also have over 40 collaborators working worldwide. I hope it's okay if I don't put them up all on the screen. It'd be a little bit too much information. In ManyBabies-At Home, we're focusing on looking time measures, which has been a dominant dominant paradigm used to study in infant cognition over the past few decades. And up until recently, it was used mostly exclusively within a lab setting. But as we move to testing online with remote studies, whether through necessity because of the pandemic or through some of these kinds of reasons, so remote studies have, they are able to address many of the limitations that we find in lab studies. So for example, remote studies allow for flexible participation time. When parents can easily choose when they're available to participate with their child, they're going to choose times that are not feeding times, not napping times, not cranky baby times. And this could translate to larger participation, larger retention rates in our participant numbers. Remote studies also have the potential to reach new populations. So if caregivers and infants no longer need to come to a physical baby lab, and instead the baby lab is anywhere that they have internet access, they may be more likely to participate. And the setup is also not lab specific, meaning that collaboration across labs and languages is much easier. But of course, remote studies can present new challenges. So our homes are obviously different from our carefully controlled baby labs. They're visually noisy, and the positioning of the infant can sometimes be suboptimal, as you can see in this picture on the right. Additionally, when we're collecting eye movements with a webcam, we're not able to use our fancy eye trackers. So right now our options for getting data are either hand coding or automatic gaze coding algorithms. But meeting these kinds of challenges is one of the goals of ManyBabies-At Home. So how are we doing that? So the first challenge, remote studies happening in diverse, noisy environments. Our solution is to discover and disseminate best practices in standardization. So some things are out of our control, like participants' internet connectivity or delays in stimuli presentation that may result from that. And in order to deal with that, we're identifying best practices in experimental design to minimize the influences of these kinds of factors. For other things, we can actively work to identify the best ways to instruct parents and infants to position themselves in order to generalize to as many cameras, screens, and environments as possible. Like I said, since we don't have our fancy eye trackers, we either have to code the videos by hand, which is time consuming and expensive, or use automatic gaze coding. And sometimes these algorithms perform really well, like here in the image on the left, but other times poorly. For example, not detecting a gaze even when the infant was looking at the screen. But there's been immense improvement in this area over the past years, and that makes us really optimistic. And we want to support this as well. So our approach to supporting the training of gaze coding algorithms is first by collecting data, and I'm going to talk to you about the projects where we're going to be collecting data in a moment. And then by using a standardized approach to hand coding. So putting up a coding handbook, kind of guiding our coders through how to code these study sessions, and then providing this data, this coded data, to train algorithms to improve automatic gaze coding. So how will we measure looking time in remote studies? Fortunately, we don't need to start from scratch. So the Lookit platform was developed by MIT. It was created for exactly the kind of purpose of what we want to accomplish in ManyBabies-At-Home, to use caregivers' webcams at home to record infant eye movements. They also have a robust plan for data storage, and best of all, it's open source. But there are some issues that have prevented the widespread use of Lookit. One of them is that their server is located in the US and their language support is mostly in English. But again, these are things that we would like to try to address in ManyBabies-At-Home. For example, Lookit's server being located in the US, to be GDPR compliant in Europe. This is kind of guidelines for data protection that are set here in Europe. In order to be GDPR compliant, participants need to be clearly informed about where their data is being stored and who is doing it. And our solution to this is baked into our ethics approach. So to participate, families have to be willing to have their videos and data shared for scientific and educational purposes. We've now got an umbrella ethics approval from the University of Nottingham in England for this approach. And this should cover most researchers, but we'll also add individual collaborators to this ethics document if they need to have access to raw participant data. And by that, I mean the kind of data that is all of the data that is stored on Lookit. So demographics, date of birth, the consent video, and the video of the experiment itself. And if need be, we'll also provide collaborators with template texts if they need to get additional IRD approval at their institutions. So we've also been working on a plan to ensure ethical data management. So this figure illustrates the flow of the data that we're planning, and this is definitely going to be subject to change as we move forward in the project. So it illustrates the flow of the data, the details, and who has access to the data at that particular point. So for example, only administrators are included on our ethics approval, and only those people will have access to the full set of data. And what the administrators will do will prepare the data to be able to share de-identified coding packets containing videos to be coded by individual coders. That's where the hand coding will be taking place. And then we'll funnel back this coded information back into OSF for the data analysis at a later stage. Another challenge is that Lookit mainly supports English right now. The landing page and the different templates are in English, and this is potentially confusing for parents if we want to reach a wide audience, a diverse audience across the globe. So we have a team working on translating the Lookit website to many different languages, which I've listed here on the left. And we've developed a pipeline to integrate it with Lookit. I won't pretend to understand how that particular part works, but that's currently one of the stages that we're working on right now. And to show you an example, this is what the Lookit website would look like using the Japanese version. So for the rest of the talk today, I'd like to talk to you about two studies that are currently being developed within the ManyBabies-At-Home framework. You'll notice up until now, I haven't actually talked about a research project. So that's kind of where this phase comes in. The first study is looking at visual preference. It's a very simple experiment using only visual stimuli. And the second study is examining word recognition using the looking while listening paradigm. This one uses both visual and auditory stimuli. So I'll give you an example of a trial in the first study, visual preference. And here they're interested in whether they can reliably capture infants' attention. I don't think you can hear the sound, right? No, that's good, because it's wonderful for babies, but really annoying when you're giving a talk. So they're interested in whether they can reliably capture infants' attention and whether infants will, for example, look longer to the dynamic stimulus there on the left. So they'd like to test this in many different conditions. So they're varying the complexity of the stimuli, low complexity, high complexity, of whether they're static or dynamic, like I was just showing you, as well as whether there's one or two images on the screen. So very simple looking measurements here. And they've got several research questions that they've identified. So do infants look longer to dynamic compared to static stimuli? Is there a developmental change in looking times depending on stimulus complexity? And will you find it, that paired or individual stimulus presentation is the more sensitive measure? The status of this study right now, they've piloted the study on the English version of Look It, collected data from 50 infants, currently setting up the hand coding procedure right now. And then the next step after that will be comparing this with automatic algorithms and then an international rollout. So stay tuned for how you can participate there, or you can just join the project yourself now and make sure that that gets to that point sooner. Now I'd like to focus on the second study, the Looking While Listening sub-project. I'm also the leader of this particular project, so probably also a little bit better able to tell you about it and answer questions. So here we're interested in word recognition in infants, and we're using the Looking While Listening paradigm, or also the intermodal preferential looking paradigm. So in this paradigm, you present two images on the screen and you label one of those images. So in this example, a jacket, the image on the right, and you track infants' eye movements to those two images. And you can compute something like this, the proportion of looks to the target, here chance being at 50%. And if you find that the looks are above this chance level, that's a pretty good indication that the infant is recognizing this word. So they're looking more to jacket when they're hearing jacket, indicating that they probably know this word. And within this study, we've also identified several goals. So one is to create a standard approach using Look It for the Looking While Listening paradigm. This has involved answering questions like, what are the best practices? What are the best ways of adapting this paradigm to remote studies, especially using the Look It platform? And best practices is another one of the goals of ManyBabies-At-Home. We're also interested in reaching a wide age range of infants. This is also something that's a little bit easier with remote studies, where we don't have to invite just a narrow window of infant ages. And here we're interested in answering the question of how the time course of word recognition might change with development. And the final interest and research question of ours is to reach infants learning a wide range of different first languages. We're ourselves curious about nouns and verbs, especially whether recognition of those kinds of words would vary cross-linguistically. And one thing I'd like to mention here or emphasize is that this kind of cross-linguistic research using this paradigm hasn't been done before on this scale, which is at times really, really, really exciting, and at other times really, really challenging. One can quickly see why this hasn't been developed, or this hasn't been attempted at this scale previously. But we're up to the challenge and really excited about what we're going to be able to do. So we've also run a pilot study in study 2. This was run by student intern extraordinaire, Sarah de Nederlanden. And she was interested in whether the type of carrier phrase might affect looking behavior. So in this type of paradigm, you not only label one of the images, but you might have some sort of accompanying language prompting the child to look at one of the images. So this could be as long as something like, where is the book? Or you could just have article or determiner and the target word, so the book, or just the target word, book. And she has tested 70 US babies using the Look It platform, and coding is also currently in progress for this pilot study. So that's part of the status of study 2. Another part of it, like I mentioned before, the cross-linguistic nature of this study. We're currently working on determining an algorithm for choosing stimuli in each language. So something that's really important for us is that we don't want the stimuli in this study to be biased in favor of specific languages, but this is challenging because literature is heavily influenced by the study of English learning infants. So a lot of the kinds of words that are chosen are really appropriate for infants learning English, but not necessarily for infants learning other kinds of languages. So we want to ensure that our stimuli are cross-culturally appropriate. So this is something that we're working on right now within this sub-project. So I'm at the end of my talk. The ManyBabies-At Home project, we're aiming to make online infant testing robust and accessible to researchers. I hope I've been able to outline for you some of the ways that we're trying to meet these goals that I set out at the beginning of my talk. And I also was able to present you a short look at the 2 studies that are currently in preparation within our framework. If I piqued your interest, you're interested in getting involved, here are some of the ways you can join the Slack. If you want to join the listserv, just shoot me an email. We also have our website. I mentioned some of the current tasks that we're working on right now: stimuli design in study 2, translations of the WCAT website. We're also interested in recruitment strategies, especially thinking about recruiting infants globally. Hand annotation, standardizing practices there, writing it in an accessible way for their collaborators, and as well working on automatic annotation. Like I said, if you want to join, give me an email. If you want to just say hi, send me an email as well. And I also have my Twitter handle up there. Thanks.
Great, thank you, Katie. That was awesome. Does anybody have a question for Katie? Yeah, Laher, go ahead.
Hi, Katie. Thanks. That was really interesting. I guess I was wondering, because you have more than 100 pilot participants across the 2 experiments, if you have a sense of whether you've been able to attract a more demographically diverse participant sample because of having remote options?
I could not tell you off the top of my head. So this is one of our wishes in this project. I think I had seen, I'm only remembering her last name, Melissa Kleinstuhl.
Yeah.
And I also said that very German, sorry. I think she would probably be able to better speak to that in terms of the data that has been collected so far. I know that we also were very, we're listening with bated breath on what MB demographics is going to produce, because I think what we'd like to do is probably integrate at least your 1-pager. I think you would talk to Rodri to be able to better track that. Mm. So short answer, I can't give you an answer.
Thanks.